Hey everyone, so One Piece chapter 1054 just came out, and as we know, over the course of this break, Oda has been dropping little quotes about how the final saga of One Piece is about to begin, right? The final curtain is about to rise on the final act of the story, and it really did feel like that with this chapter, and in particular, one scene with a certain red-haired character made it feel like that, but we'll get to that in a second. So, to begin with, the chapter kicks right off with Green Bull versus the Scabbards. Man, okay, we've got a lot of content to talk about with today's chapter, right? So it begins with Green Bull fighting for the first time. So I'm happy that we got to see him in action right away. Oda cut straight to the chase. What's interesting is that the characters that came out are all Wano-specific characters. I think a lot of people were looking forward to seeing, okay, what's Green Bull going to do to the Alliance? But instead, we're getting to see the Scabbards come out, Yamato come out, Momonosuke come out, and basically fight in place of the Alliance in that you're not getting to Straw Hat Luffy after everything that Luffy's done for us. So I like seeing that, and for, for power scalers and everything like that, I'm sure that this is a pleasant surprise and that we get to see a familiar matchup, which is all of the Scabbards against one big boss, right? So we got the Scabbards versus Kaido. This is obviously not exactly the same group as we had before. We've lost a couple characters. But, and it's not a full moon or anything like that, but we are getting to see a bit of a skirmish between the Scabbards versus Green Bull, and Green Bull seems to be obviously a very formidable enemy against them as well, so he's not going to go down to just the Scabbards, it looks like. Yamato shows up, and obviously Yamato, with her Conqueror's Haki, Advanced Conqueror's Haki, she's going to be able to do quite a bit more damage than just the Scabbards are able to do. It's an interesting, I guess, little recurring trend. If you remember that over the course of the fight with Kaido and the Scabbards, Kaido made it clear that even though the Scabbards are able to cut him because they have advanced armament haki, what we the fandom call Ryo, right? Even though the Scabbards have that, they're not able to do actual significant damage. So Kaido makes it clear that their attacks are too shallow. On the flip side, Kaido praises anybody who's able to use advanced Conqueror's haki against him. So obviously Luffy, Zoro was able to actually leave a scar because he used Ashura, which, as we now understand, seems to be tied to Conqueror's haki. And then finally, Kaido was fighting with Yamato, and Yamato was able to injure him. So it does seem like for a lot of these top-tier characters, Kaido before and now Green Bull, to really be able to inflict any sort of meaningful damage that, affects them, Advanced Conqueror's haki does seem to be important, right? Obviously, that's leaving out things like Devil Fruits, like the Gura Gura no Mi, or powerful Logias, or things like that, and I'm sure that you don't need to have Advanced Conqueror's haki to do it, but at the very least, if haki's all you're working with, it looks like Advanced Conqueror's haki is pretty necessary. So, that's an interesting little tidbit that kind of stood out to me from their interaction. More importantly, we got an idea of what Green Bull is like. It's interesting in that Green Bull's dialogue, so he comes across as basically, red shirt mentality, right? Like just a straightforward, I'm gonna execute what needs to be executed because I believe, like, he's a bootlicker, right? He's a bootlicker. He believes the Celestial Dragons are, everything that the Celestial Dragons believe themselves to be, if that makes sense. They're the gods of this world. Everybody else falls below them in the hierarchy, and everybody just step in line and get to following the status quo. That's interesting to see because I think a lot of people have come to expect maybe a bit more, I wouldn't say independence from the admirals, but think about the admirals that we've had so far. Obviously, Aokiji, who is a very independent thinker in his own way, he follows his own code of justice, right? He was following along with authority for a good period of time, but at the same time, he makes decisions that don't exactly fall under what he's supposed to be doing, such as letting Robin live. And then, obviously, over the course of as things develop, he ultimately left the Marines, right? So he doesn't just step in line like all of the other admirals, like many of the Marines, right? Fujitora, obviously, nothing needs to be said there. He is someone who follows exclusively his own sense of justice and basically completely ignores whatever the hell the Marines are telling him if he doesn't agree with it. Akainu, even though it seems as though he's someone who is very strict and by the book, that is true, but at the same time, he has his own vision of what that means, which is what makes him an interesting character, in that he may disagree with what the Celestial Dragons are doing, right? We've seen him argue with the Gorosei, we've seen that he's not happy with how things are run necessarily, so he does want things to fall into a certain sense of strict order and justice, but he has his own vision of how that should play out. Green Bull, Kizaru, I've got nothing to say because Kizaru is just tuned out. So he's independent in his own sense in that he doesn't really care too much, it feels like, about how things are going. He's like, should I just go over and fight Kaido and Big Mom? And kind of is like, whoa, hold on, Kizaru, let's not go ahead and do that right now, right? So Kizaru, you know, we've seen little quotes about, like, throughout the war as well, with, like, he just wants things simple and straightforward. Characters show up, he's like, Sengoku-san, can I assume that I could just go execute all of them, right? So that's kind of Kizaru's shtick. All of that's to say is that Green Bull is the first of these admirals that seems like the model soldier, right? Who's not only ready to execute whatever the higher-ups are telling him, but he is fully bought in mentally into the idea that the world, the way it's structured right now, is correct, it is perfect, and I'm here to basically carry out the orders of the higher-ups to make sure that things stay that way. So, on the one hand, you could say that maybe that's a more shallow, one-dimensional take on, you know, what an admiral could be, but at the same time, I think that that is perfect, in my opinion, for the stage of the story we are at right now. So the stage of the story we're at right now is obviously heading towards the final war, final battle, final, you know, conflict with the world government, right? In that sense, I think it's fitting at this point that the final admiral to be introduced is not, you know, some loose cannon or free thinker or anything like that. We just need some more strong, powerful soldiers by the world government side, right? Because the alliance is, they're pretty stacked at the moment, right? They're pretty stacked. I do think we need, you know, considering how Fujitora is, in all likelihood, very possibly not going to be fighting on the world government side at the end of the day, considering his morality and his sense of justice and right and wrong, and his already established criticisms of the world government and his refusals to follow orders, depending on if he agrees or disagrees. Considering all of that, I do think that it is important that Akainu, obviously, we know is going to be on the world government side. Kizaru, yes, but like Green Bull, there seems to be no questions about it. He is also going to be a powerful figure fighting for the world government side. So just establishing that the final sort of set of I guess, bosses, you could say, that the world government still has up its sleeve, you know, they're here to stay, and they are all powerful characters that are all relatively bought into fighting on the world government side. I think that that's important. So I don't think we needed a particularly complex admiral right here. I think we just needed a strong character that is very clearly going to be a difficult opponent down the road, and is very clearly going to be on the opposing side of the good characters come endgame. So I actually like that about Green Bull. With Momonosuke showing up, I think that obviously we have to see how this plays out next chapter, but I do think that there's good potential here for both him and maybe for Yamato. Maybe I won't speak too much about Yamato right here. I might elaborate on that in a future stream, but with Momonosuke in particular, I'm just saying that because maybe what I'm about to say about Yamato is a bit too speculative, so we're going to leave that. With Momonosuke in particular, I like that he's showing up to fight, because something that was somewhat abandoned, I felt, over the course of, you know, the third act of Wano, is Momonosuke's sort of primary goal or motivation that was developing throughout Act 1 and Act 2. Why was he practicing Tsunachi so much? Why was he practicing with the sword so much? He repeats, from the moment that we first see him in Wano, all the way throughout Act 1 and Act 2, Momonosuke keeps reiterating that he doesn't just want to be a figurehead or a leader, right? He wants to actively be able to fight and participate in the war. And that was something that was kind of weighing heavily on him and that he really wanted to do. So I like the fact that, you know, you can say that Momonosuke's best moment was him coming out, giving the big speech and everything like that, but that is still him ultimately acting out that role of a figurehead, that role of a leader, playing out basically, you know, the Kazuki role that they already wanted him to play out, you know, going back to the prison mine scene. It's what they're seeing. They're seeing the Kazuki symbol within Momonosuke, right? They're looking to him as the Kazuki symbol, so they're ready to follow him because of the name that he carries, right? And that's basically how he used that and leveraged that, obviously, during his big speech scene, right? But it doesn't quite go to what he was focused on and what he was struggling with and what he was trying to get to over the course of Act 1 and Act 2, which is that he wants to be able to fight and protect people and fight alongside other people. So, I don't imagine Momonosuke doing anything of note at all to Green Bull. Biting's not going to work. He's as far as we can tell, it seems like he's a Logia or something like that. So, at the very least, it's like biting a tree. He's not doing anything to Green Bull, but seeing Momonosuke trying to fight, I think that that's, following up on something that was kind of set up for his character a while back. He did get, of course, that bite in on Kaido, so he did get a moment over the course of the war, but we all know that that was sort of a token show of, I guess, rebellion, or kind of just showing that he's got those guts in him, but not necessarily, like, it's not like he actually did anything of note in terms of combat over the course of the war. So it's interesting to see that coming full circle here, and Momonosuke actually seemingly wanting to do this himself, even though we know that he's not going to be able to. So I look forward to seeing how that plays out for him over the course of the next chapter or two. The best part of this chapter, in my opinion, for me personally, was the Shanks section. Not just because we had Shanks show up, not just because Yasopp has made it very clear that he is in fact a deadbeat father through and through, and is still, to this point, how is he still trying to avoid meeting up with Usopp? That's insane to me, considering Usopp, like, at this point, Usopp is a full-fledged member of another Yonko crew. How much further along do Luffy and the Straw Hats need to get before Yasopp's going to be actually mentally ready to go meet his son? I mean, his son's a grown man at this point. He's not going to be asking daddy for any presents or anything like that. I don't know. But that was a funny little bit. More importantly, I think with the Shanks scene, my favorite part about it was kind of just how Oda took his time with it. So this is something that we've been getting throughout the Wano arc, which is that Oda's got a lot of content to fit into, I won't say a small amount of chapters because Wano was pretty long, but he's got a lot of content to fit into 20 pages each chapter, right? So what can happen is that lots of times things can kind of be sped along, right? We left the end of last chapter with Green Bull walking away, but we start this chapter with everybody already assembled and Green Bull fighting, right? That's a quick example. With Shanks, I really appreciate the fact that Oda, he knows how important it is to us, the reader, that we get a really good scene of Shanks reminiscing about his past with Luffy and acknowledging how far Luffy has come, because this is something that is, factually, from chapter 1 to chapter 1054, it's over 1,000 chapters in the making between Shanks initially giving Luffy the hat to Shanks right now feeling like Luffy is basically ready, right? He feels like it's time to meet Luffy. It's just not right here, right now, necessarily, because they've got some stuff to take care of back home, which, funnily enough, is caused by Luffy. Bartolomeo, obviously, being a member of Luffy's Grand Fleet. So I just appreciate the fact that Oda took his time pacing out the pages that Shanks is in, giving us those little flashback montages. Obviously, those can go by a little quick, but especially the last page when he's just, setting up the sake cups and everything like that, the shots of him, Ben Beckman, it all feels slow, and it has some weight behind it. It feels like there's some gravity to the scene, with Shanks finally saying, okay, it's time to go time to go get the One Piece. Now, I am not going to read too much into that line. I already see people jumping to the evil Shanks theories and all of that stuff. I think it's way too early to tell. I think Shanks is just always going to be a somewhat mysterious figure until we finally figure out his motives, and I think that Oda likes to play the game of what exactly is Shanks' full intent. He did this with Shanks showing up at the Reverie and having to talk to the Gorosei. He's doing it obviously again right now. I don't think that this is necessarily Shanks trying to compete for the One Piece. It could be something as simple as basically, let's go meet with Luffy at Raftel to give him one final challenge or something like that, right? Maybe give him a run for their money for One Piece so that they really have to earn it. I don't know if it's the same thing as Shanks suddenly deciding, okay, now's the time for me to personally seize the One Piece, but who knows? Who knows? I personally don't believe that Shanks is evil, but you never know, and I wouldn't necessarily welcome it or be against it. I would just love to see how Oda does it, but I just don't think it's worth talking about right now. I'm only even acknowledging it here because I see so many people talking about how ominous that quote was and how it might make Shanks might be setting the seeds for something for Shanks in the future. At the moment, I'm just taking things at face value, which is that Shanks genuinely, he's genuinely happy and appreciative. Not appreciative is the wrong word, but he's genuinely happy to see how far Luffy has come, and he's just enjoying this moment for what it is. So I'll leave that alone. That's my favorite part of this chapter by far. finally, we've got the shenanigans that happened at the Reverie. Man, I hope we get some pages or some chapter, maybe Sabo talking through what happened at some point, and we get some quick flashback or something like that, because it seems like so much happened at the Reverie. Apparently Cobra is dead. I don't think that Sabo killed him or whatever, unless it was something staged deliberately. Cobra choosing to sacrifice himself or something along those lines. I mentioned this in stream yesterday, but maybe like a Dumbledore Snape situation. I shouldn't have to say spoilers for Harry Potter. That stuff is really, really old. But I do think that, you know, with Cobra being dead, it's one of those things where Oda likes to set up certain characters to die before it's time for them to die. So, you know, Pedro had his really short lifespan, so him dying wasn't a huge deal. Whitebeard, obviously, he was literally on his deathbed pretty much. Now, I won't say literally on his deathbed, but he had tubes and everything going through him. He was on his last legs by the time he went to Marineford. So I think that this is another case with Oda feeling very comfortable killing off Cobra, because he's already set up Cobra with this debilitating illness and everything like that, so Cobra's days were already numbered. With that in mind, Cobra aside, the bigger question is basically what happened to Vivi, because people were talking in stream yesterday about how the Sabo events and the Vivi events seem to line up really, really neatly, to the point that it's possible that those two have met up, are possibly in cahoots with one another or something like that. Maybe one aiding the other's escape or something along those lines. I would personally, maybe I'm a little biased, but I would personally love to see some sort of Sabo Vivi storyline develop. Not even necessarily romance or anything like that, because we know Oda kind of stays away from that sort of thing unless, you know, unless it's something really minor or gag based in the background. But just, it would be interesting. Those are by far the two most interesting characters, the characters that I think most readers care the most about, that were at the Reverie. And they're two characters that are very significant in terms of their relationship to Luffy, and I guess you could say even with Sabo, the Straw Hats in general. Vivi obviously with the Straw Hats. So those two and those are the two characters that are going to be most politically, I guess, I explain this better in the video that's coming out Tuesday. Because in the video that's coming out Tuesday, it's all about Sabo and the potential role that he could have over the course of the rest of the story. I will say that Sabo and Vivi are both very politically smart characters, and they're just coming at it from opposite ends, with Vivi actually being a queen of a country, and Sabo being an activist or revolutionary who's actually trying to change the way that the world functions and runs, right? So I think that those two characters meeting up could be very, very interesting, if they haven't already. And besides that, I'm not going to talk much about Sabo right here, because Sabo, there's a full video coming out on Tuesday about how a lot of my thoughts and opinions about Sabo kind of flipped after reading this chapter, in terms of me kind of realizing the potential that this character has and the role that Oda might be kind of crafting for him. And obviously, even that, if that's not necessarily the role that I'm imagining that he's crafting for him, it does seem like there's something more, there's a greater idea behind what Sabo can be in this story that I, up till now, was not really expecting. Just the fact that we got these quotes in this chapter that Sabo, being called the Flame Emperor now, is actually being viewed by many as being even more of a symbol of rebellion or revolution than Dragon, that is huge. That has tremendous potential for him over the course of the rest of the story. So I'm definitely looking forward to seeing more of Sabo from here on out. Last little interesting tidbits that we got over the course of this. We have another one of these, I guess you could call them, I don't even know what the word to say. I'm mentally thinking of them as like the Zodiac Vice Admirals, which is, you know, we've got Brown Pig, Chaton, we've got Pink Rabbit, I believe Momosagi is her name, and, you know, now we've got Black Horse, and some people were mentioning, so obviously, you know, we've got Red Dog, Yellow Monkey, Blue Pheasant, these other color animal-based admirals that have already been laid out. But the fact that we're also seemingly getting to complete the full, you know, the full roster of I guess, Zodiac animals with some corresponding colors and everything like that, to me that suggests that some of these new Vice Admirals that we're meeting post-time skip may be more prominent or more powerful, or like maybe a bigger deal than the previous Vice Admirals. So maybe they were candidates even for becoming admirals in the future. I like to think that we're going to get to see all of these guys in combat down the line, and that they might be a bit of a cut above the average Vice Admiral, so that's exciting to think about on its own. We learned about the Knights of God that are supposedly in Marijua. Don't really know what to make of that. I was under the impression that CP0, you know, Shield, was basically the only, like, elite guard force, I suppose, that the World Nobles really needed, as they're kind of the executors of their will. But it sounds like we've got another batch of characters that sound pretty strong that we've got to look forward to, so the Knights of God. So that's going to be interesting to see, obviously, in the end game. I'm hoping that the end game involves some sort of war in Marijua, so we're probably going to get to see these guys fight as well. Akainu seems to trust in how strong they are. And finally, Akainu is talking about, you know, taking the initiative. I have wanted to see Akainu get serious for a long time. I'm not saying he's about to fight or anything like that, but he's kind of been in the mode of getting used to his new job and having to deal with all of this BS that he didn't have to before, right? That's what we've been seeing him in the role of over the course of post-time skip. Now I think we're finally going to get to see, you know, War General Akainu, right? Commander-in-Chief of the military force of the world government, actually taking command and having to, you know, be a general in battle. So that's the Akainu that I was looking forward to see the most ever since he got his Fleet Admiral promotion. Not, you know, management getting angry about people going over his head Akainu, you know, but actual War General Akainu. So it seems like we're set up to get that guy back, and I'm definitely looking forward to it. Akainu is one of my most looked forward to characters to see fight again in the end game of the story. And he's, in a way, my favorite admiral, just because he's the most exciting of the bunch. I guess if you've got Akainu in a chapter, it's probably the most exciting appearance to me out of any of the admirals at the moment. So that's all for today's discussion, and if you enjoyed, then definitely like and subscribe, and you can get my extended thoughts on this and all future topics on Patreon, link in the description below.